Hello, and welcome back to Sharing a Chapter a Day. This is Do, Ra, me, and today I will be reading Chapter 68 of Engagement in Peril by Dara Ado Sok. Chapter 68 is titled New York City and Club Twilo. During September of 1998, while on medical hold and restriction from leaving base, Yi, the Korean nuclear technician sailor, and Thomas, the Caucasian jock who injured himself playing tag football, and I, the angry combat corpsman, decided to go New York City to party. So I had bachelor thoughts. We were given a 3-day holiday weekend that week for Labor Day weekend. But we weren't allowed to leave base for the overnight stay because we were all under the care of the base and held on medical hold and needed to be watched upon regularly. Anyhow, we snuck off base anyway and spent the weekend away from military life of constant rules and regulation. Real early that morning on that day that we were to leave, and while the world around us was still sound asleep, we took Thomas' Acura sedan and drove to New Jersey from Newport, Rhode Island. I had risen real early to get ready and walked to Yee's and Thomas' barrack and waited for them while they readied themselves for our weekend trip away from Newport. Once ready, we all loaded into the small sports car and hurriedly snuck off base, and luckily for us that morning, the exit sentry didn't notice who we were. He just waved us on by and allowed us to pass on through the exit gate of the naval base. From then we headed toward the Claiborne-Pell Newport Bridge to leave the small state of Rhode Island. The trip to New Jersey was smooth and quite noisy with Thomas blasting his car stereo on various music radio stations then. We stopped to get gas several times and stopped at various fast food chains to eat and shoot the breeze for a bit. We all shared in the expense of the gas, food, and beverages. We met several good-looking young ladies on the way to get wasted at various stops and made small talk and such with them. The journey itself was enough to get us all wired up, and we were all ready to party. I had other intentions there as well. I, lonely then, was hoping that I might get my nut off. Perhaps we could hook up with some loose, promiscuous girls there in the New York area. And once we arrived in New Jersey, we decided to find lodging at a nearby hotel. We got a room at the Travelodge Inn. The inn was closest to the subway that would take us to New York City. We got a room with 2 beds, but there were 3 of us staying there, so someone had to share or sleep on the floor. Thomas knew this place around this particular place really well. It seemed that he had been here before, and he had been raised, lived, and grew up around the New England states anyway. We checked into the Travelodge and rested during the rest of the day in the room, ordering food from a nearby Asian restaurant and watched television until dusk. When night fell, we readied ourselves by getting dressed in jeans and polo shirts, and off to the club in New York City we went. We drove to the nearest subway station where we found parking and purchased several subway tickets and waited to board a subway train that shortly arrived. Our final destination was the Big Apple that night. New York, New York. Here we come. I have never been this far east before and had no idea what to expect. I relied on Thomas and Yi then to show me around and to keep me safe and sound. After all, they are my friend. They were my friends and fellow sailor. That's what I was hoping. Yi and Thomas were sure took real good care of you then, Dara, huh? It's funny that 3 ignorant fools will do and put themselves through to get high and wasted, to escape the everyday mundane reality of life, of military life. You were lucky that nothing dangerous or serious happened to you then. We didn't have to wait long for the next train to New York. We all purchased our tickets from the ticket vending machine and boarded the subway train. The train ride was pretty smooth. It was my first time on and in an actual subway train. The cabin were pretty crowded throughout with various multi-diversity of race and background. Luckily, we managed to find seats and had small chatter along the way to our final destination. I saw various characters on the train. It wasn't too different from any large metropolitan city. You have your usual gangster, your hustler, your pickpocketer, your thugs, your muggers and such, and also your bustling beauties, and your plastic doll, your bitches, your ugly, and your whores and your hookers, that kind of stuff. It was a city full of diversity in life. It was the Big Apple, after all, and everyone had a story to tell. To me, New York was pretty dirty. From the ground up to the skyscraper above and damn, it was crowded. Yellow cabs, taxis, and buses were everywhere. Everyone was in a hurry to get somewhere, and so were we. We had to hit the club scene that Thomas was so eagerly talking about. My sole purpose of coming along with the guys at this sinful getaway was to make sure they come back to base on time and with as little problem as possible. That was my goal and thinking then. I was the higher rank sailor of the bunch and felt it was my duty to watch over these guys. Just like the time I hung out with Martinez and another sailor in Rosarito, Mexico. And I wanted to experience what it was like to be in a club and see the world in a different light. An actual club in the U.S. We're not talking about Tijuana. Away from my mundane existence so far. Although I didn't tell them that was the reason I went with them. I wanted to fit in and had never experienced a club scene before in the U.S. and felt that it was the best time as any, if I were to discover and experience a new part of my life, something that I had never tried before. So I wanted to experience something new. Once off the train, we made our way to the surface area. We had to climb several flights of stairs and such. Trash were all about and all over the subway grounds and benches. Homeless people sleeping and too drunk to get out of people's way were walked over and stepped on as people hurriedly and made their way to the bustling world above. Seeing the bustling crowd pushing, shoveling, and squirming their way out of the subway reminded me of H.G. Wells' novel, The Time Machine, where the Morlocks live in an underground lair and where the Eloy, the beautiful blonde blue-eyed people live above. We had to make our way through this tarry ocean of Morlocks to reach our destination of becoming one of those beautiful people above. That's how I pictured it. Looking around our surrounding, we saw a handful of subway cops all about the underground city. They were watching and profiling various type of group of people. It gave me a sense of security, but it was more like invading one's privacy. They busied themselves by eyeing and second thinking and prejudging people's characteristic and behavior. But at least they know what they were looking for. At least they know there were people down there to enforce the law and such. It gave me a sense of security. New York wasn't at all what I had expected. New York was dirty and smelly. Trash and debris were all about, steam rising from the sewer and manhole cover, and there I was in the urban jungle metropolitan of New York, the diversity steel jungle of metropolitan America. Eagerly impatient, I moved on, following Thomas and Yi as we walked on toward our destination. Once out of the sewer-filled subway and stepped, Yi, Thomas, and I quickly paced about the concrete street and sidewalk for about a mile or more while neon lights flashes and lace our retina with its sparkling light, shines that advertise what's good for us and telling us what we want and desire. Lights of nightclubs and adult attraction flutter and clutter our walkway as we made our way toward our destination. Around 20:30 or so that evening, we eventually ended up at a club called Twilo on West 27th Street in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan, New York, where hundreds of people were already lined up to enter the warehouse-like nightclub. Twilo was a so-called dance club in the middle of downtown Manhattan area, about 22 blocks or so from the train subway station. The charge for entering the nightclub establishment was $20 or so at the time. Also, they made sure we were wearing appropriate attire, clothing, and such. The bouncer who would look us up and down, making sure you were the type of person that they wanted in their so-called refined club. And luckily that night, we all wore appropriate attire and we were lucky enough to fit in and were all allowed to go in. Of course, we had to pay. I was scared somewhat then and had no idea what to expect of the club. So I swallowed my pride and fear and entered the crazy-ass atmosphere, walking behind Yi and Thomas. I was allowing myself to get into what was about to happen that night. I was throwing out all my inhibition out the window tonight and perhaps find a new me in the process. The club was packed like sardines in a can. All sorts of people were there. All races, color, genders, creed were packed in this loud, hostile rave environment. The building that we entered was several stories tall, and each level was separated according by various theme and outfit. There was another dance hall upstairs that only catered to Japanese clients that night, and we weren't allowed to go up there because we weren't Japanese or we didn't look the type for that particular party because it seemed that everyone in that scene wore suits and such, except for the petite Asian female dancer, escort, hookers, and guests, of course. Back at where I was hanging out, partiers and ravers were dressed in all sorts of clothing and fashion, and some didn't even wear any clothes at all. And those were the one I kept my eyes on the most. I must admit, they were a sight for sore eyes, and I was pretty much in the mood for some sinful act that night, some sinful action that night. I'd never gotten wasted and fucked my brains out before. Best time for any at the moment, so I had thought. I wanted to experience what it was like to be loose and out of control mentally and physically. I was letting myself go for the first time in a long time. Good thing you didn't go all out that night, Dara. You sure would have messed yourself up real good then if you had. You remember what they slip in your drink that night, right? Do you remember? You were quite fucked up then, but you did hold your own. I'll give you that. You Christian bastard son of a bitch. Twilo was more like a drug parlor than a dance club. People with backpack full of various drugs and pills would go about around the dance floor and sell them to whoever wanted to buy them. And Yi and Thomas really wanted the drugs. That was the reason that they had wanted to come here in the first place, so I found out later. Although I didn't realize then that until we came to the club, they came to New York to get high and wasted, and there I was, once again, caught in the middle of a life-changing decision. Take the drugs and be one of the cool people, or be a little bitch and not take the drug. I chose the latter, and fortunately for me, my crew was cool with that. They didn't hassle or pressure me to take the drug they were doing. I was allowed to be the onlooker. They allowed me to make my own decision and respected my choices. It was it was there and then that I knew these two were my friends. They were like the other friends that I had hung out before in San Diego, Tijuana, and Rosarito. They were decent people, and they respected my denial and wishes. They had some goods in them, after all. Even being hassled and consumed with loud music and bunched up between so many sweaty, half-naked people there, I took some time to think about Shinshin and wonder how his adventure out there at sea, or whatever he may be doing, was going. I sure hoped that Shinshin was well and healthy and wished that he was here with me to keep me company. I had really missed him much then. I often kept his memories and our association on my mind. That night, Yi and Thomas had bought hands full of drugs and pills, mainly ecstasy and drugs that give you a sense of flying and euphoria. Once they had the drugs in their possession, they were popping it like it was candy. Club Twilo played very loud, raucous dance music from rave and techno to alternative rock and trance music, but mostly loud, nonsense music, things I didn't really understand. Everyone was on the dance floor, bunched up, back to back, ass to ass, balls to ass, crowded the whole place. Arms and legs flung here and there. Heads were bopping up and down, and while bosoms swung left and right, hitting and smacking those nearby. As for my crew, we were all hesitant at first to get on the dance floor, but after a while, once the drug finally kicked in, Yi and Thomas got on the dance floor and tore it up with the rest of the drugged up club goer and patron. Being bashful and somewhat careful of my surrounding, I took my time being before entering the live craze scene. But later on, I too got into the groove and joined in on the festive experience. We jump around like a bunch of kids at a birthday party with no style or rhythm. We move in our own fashion, throwing our limb left and right and just jerking ourselves fanatically to whatever rhythm we had inside of us then. You were really crazy then, dancing like fish out of water. But you seem to enjoy yourself all the same, Dara. I'm glad you got a little loose then. I'm sure you just had to get that burden off your chest. You were just going along with the crowd, and you finally relaxed your overwhelming burdened mind. It was a moment of clear conscience, and then for you, Dara, a moment of clarity. You were once again free in a long time. I saw people taking and popping ecstasy pill and smoking pot left and right. The drugs were being served like sugar to a bunch of hopped up teens and young adults. There were several guys there who wore glowing necklaces and such with backpack full of drugs and such, and as long as you had the cash, you can buy any drug you wanted that they had there in possession. We all danced the night away and didn't leave until around 10 the next morning. We were drenched in our own and each other's sweat from head to toe. About after an hour or two of rapidly flinging ourselves carelessly to the drug hyped up world, we stopped for a bit and shared bottled water. Nothing in the club was cheap. For a 6-ounce bottle of water, the going rate was $5, and you could imagine the price of the liquor and other beverages there. So I shared a bottle of water with the crew I had come with that night, and I think might have been something in the water that caused me to doze off for several long hours in the Ruckus Club that because I got really tired after dancing several songs, and I began to doze off right in the middle of the dance scene. So I made my way from the crowd and relaxed my tired, limp body next to a large speaker while I was blasting the raving music against my withered eardrums. I actually fell asleep, or better yet, knocked the fuck out from whatever was mixed in that bottled water. I also think it was because people were smoking pot behind me in a seating area nearby. I probably inhaled the smoke and fell asleep. Who knows? After all, it is a dance club where drugs were easily accessible and anything could have happened or could have been passed on to me and in that I ingested by mistake or unknowingly that I had taken to my bloodstream and into my body. After all, I was inebriated from secondhand drugs and juiced up from inhaling the unwarranted cannabis. I woke up several hours later, supinely on the floor alongside an enormous speaker. And the only reason I woke up was because someone had stepped on me while I was fast asleep on the cold, drenched concrete dance floor. The person must have stepped on me pretty hard because I didn't really remember a damn thing before that. So I got up, and you know what? I continued dancing some more, finding Yi and Thomas in the process, who were still high on the pills and abusing their body to the loud, horrendous rave music. By then, I too was losing my inhibition and got freaky once again. One can say everyone was damaging and sacrificing their body there in the club for a few moments of careless sins and fun, and I was no better than any of them. I too was giving I too wasn't giving a shit then. All sort of thing went on there in the at the Twilo party warehouse. Drugs, alcohol, who knows what else. Besides the overcrowding and drug dealing, Twilo had also had their own dancer. These dancers would shake their goodies on the platform that were set up all throughout the dance hall. Several of the club dancers there on the platform danced topless, exposing and baring their naked bodies to the high and drugged up crowd. As I looked on, their sweaty body glistened from the fluid that trickled down their shapely body, and that interested me. So I moved in for a closer look. But to my disbelief and surprise, these fantastic new dancers were actually men who got their chests altered to look like breasts and such. Oh well, what the fuck. Besides being attracted to dudes for that brief moment, there were many fine ass girls there too. All sorts of girls were there. Young, very young, old, not too old, and all sorts of races and gender. And I don't know if it was the drug talking. They were all attractive in my glazed eyes then. The ladies were all wearing tight everything, things that hugged their goodies and left nothing for the imagination. It was all good though. I was enjoying the scenery and enjoying this new experience. Really enjoying myself for the first time in forever. So I had thought then, still being inebriated and high from the fluid that I had consumed hours before while sharing that bottle of water with Yi and Thomas. You see, Dara, when you don't pay attention to what you're doing, things get out of hand and out of control. You were lucky you didn't die from that thing you drank that knocked you the fuck out then. You were fortunate to have awakened from the ingestion of the unknown fluid. Someone must have been watching over you once again while you were going all out at that horrendous club, Twilo. While partying and getting blazed in the dance club, we met a pair of identical twins that night. I think they were friends of Thomas or so. He seemed to know them really well. Those twins were pretty hot. Cherry and Sherry both had long brunette hair and wore matching tight outfits. One was half an inch taller than the other, but you can't really tell them apart. They had curvaceous body, with a pair of nice B-plus size bosom that nicely hugged their tight white beaters and that exposed their sensuous milkmaid nicely. They were drenched all over in their own sweat from all that moving and shaking they did on the dance floor. Both twins had very adorable New York accent, and boy, can they dance, bumping and grinding their bodies like there was no tomorrow. They danced provocatively with one another, touching and caressing each other here and there while they seduced the onlooker with their devilish acts. We talked and danced with them throughout the rest of the night and morning. We now had a crowd to hang out with for the rest of the night and morning. I was hesitant to talk to them at first because I just didn't know how to talk to the opposite sex at the time, nor can I now, and besides, I was glazed and wasn't feeling so right to talk to them. But eventually I came around and had a very nice conversation with them. They too were popping pills left and right. The twins were. Just like Ian Thomas. Like 95% of the crowd that they were there that night. They too were wasted and wanted to party. But they were so adorable and I wanted something more. You know. The ass kind. I was getting turned on by the sight of them as they caressed and fondled each other up and down in front of me. I was daydreaming about them, fantasizing about them as we loudly yelled to each other against the loud trembling music, and could picture them now. Their soft amber bosom held firmly by my grabby hands, and we had a threesome there on the dance floor. So I like to think as I fantasized there in front of those two adorable twins. I think that those twins would have given you some then, Dara. All you had to do was ask and make a move. I'm sure they were game. After all, they too, just like you, were high as a kite. It's okay to take advantage of the situation, you know. Remember, destroy and conquer. That's what the Marine had instilled in you then, right? But then again, you were on your meds then and just wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't I was being silly over the matter that could have taken. As the morning drew near and our body were tired and worn out, we took some time to relax and regain our composure. While bunched up and sitting at a crowded table, I noticed a couple, tables down from us, going at it like wild dog. The guy had his pants down to his knee while the dark blonde babe was bopping up and down on his shaft with her gulping mouth. She was blowing him away. His body jerked back and forth and his hand tightly clutching her long, dark lock as she continued to go down on him with monstrous hunger. Now I've seen it all. Drugs, nasty dancing, and sex in a club. Twilo was really a different kind of place, and this was the first time I've seen this sort of thing, and it was more than I had expected. And while I looked on around in more depth, everyone seemed to be making out in one form or another, whether it's heavy petting or fondling or actually fucking each other's out in and out. Everyone seemed to be doing it, and it seemed to be the norm here. After taking a short break to catch our breath and allowing our feet to rest, we once again stomped the concrete floor and continued to dance. Stomping and jumping around, we made our way around the dance club, pushing our tired body to the limit. Eventually, I was drenched in sweat, my eyes irritated from my sour sweat that trickled down from my forehead, and my clothing soaked and dampened. Our crew were wasting ourselves away on the dance floor. Yi, Thomas, and everyone continued to consume more pills and drugs, trying to get the same high that they had previously enjoyed earlier. They were all looking for the same euphoria that loosened them and threw out their inhibition out of the window. We all were raving about on the dance floor. Glow sticks were all about, hands and arms twisting them in every which direction, giving a sense of euphoria throughout the room. The drugged-up crowd continued to push their bodies to the monotonous rhythm that echoed throughout the dance hall. No regrets or of what the future held. We were living for the moment and giving it all a hell of a ride. And there I was in the middle of something I might eventually enjoy. While dancing and wailing about with our group of degenerates, one of the twins pulled me aside and began to make out with me. I wasn't sure what she was doing then. I wasn't sure what she was doing that for. I had never been sexually forced upon before, but I went along with her. Our mouths open and slobber all over each other, sucking and gulping down each other's saliva, and our arms wrapped and were all each other like tentacles, no, moving every which way. I'm sure she had no from her mouth. She gave me some pill from her mouth, so we shared some pills together and some lace stuff. While we made out against the dance floor railing, she dragged me further into the bench and seat area. We continued to smother each other's face and grope at each other provocatively. Thomas was making out with the other twin as well, and Yi was still dancing about on the crowded dance floor, jumping about, while the drug and pills kept him in a convoluted day state. You were really getting your groove on that night, Dara. You got the taste of ecstasy in your mouth, because that girl you were mouthing had slipped several pills down your throat while you were tonguing and making out with her. You really enjoyed yourself that night, you lucky dog. Our makeout with the twin didn't really lead to anything more than just making out. We mouthed and slobbered all over each other, and provocatively helped and grope at each other. And that was it. Shortly after, still wanted to get high and wasted. Thomas and the twin went about, got more drugs and pill, and we all once again hammered into and onto the soaked, stained nightclub dance floor. We danced our brains out that night and morning. We didn't bother leaving Twilo until 10 the next morning. The twins and their friends and Yi, Thomas and me several hours later, they all came in a vehicle that didn't have room for us, so we just stuck around the club and continued to dance out our weary mind for a few more hours before we finally left for some rest. Back to New Jersey, back to the travel lodge. Eventually, with our body and energy diminished, worn out, and famished, we dragged our exhausted, limp body out of Club Twilo. By then it was morning and the sun was shining. The cold air woke us up for a bit, and we marched out We marched our used up bodies back to the train station where we caught the subway back to New Jersey and to a room at the Travel Lodge Inn. While on the train, we took turns taking short cat naps, making sure not to miss our stop and watching out for one another in case we get mugged or something. While sitting there on the moving train, I thought about the previous night out there that I just had and experienced. All of a different crowd I saw, witnessed, and experienced there that crazy ass night. I actually made out with a total stranger then, and I sort of liked it. I kissed the girl, and I liked it as I laughed to myself then. I hope she didn't give me anything like herpes, mouth sore and such. That's what I had thought as well. Me being a medic, worry about that sort of thing all the time. But I really enjoyed myself then. I think it was enough for me. I realized then and there, I don't really need this kind of scene anymore. Although I didn't regret it, I just didn't want to be that scared again. You're right, Dara. You're right about that. You didn't need that kind of scene anymore, although that making out was pretty nice. But the drugs and pill, that's not your cup of tea. So next time, be careful, okay? Just pretend to do the drug and pills instead of actually doing it, you son of a bitch. As I reminded myself of what could have happened when you're high and out of it. After a good ride back to New Jersey and after gathering ourselves and belonging, we exited the train at our stop, entered Thomas Acura, and we slowly drove back to the travel lodge and hurriedly marched out the step and into our room. Once there, we flung ourselves onto the bed in our soiled clothes and slept the entire day without bothering to undress or remove any of our clothing. We all slept soundly that mid-morning. We rested and while replenishing our tired body and restoring our vitality, and when night fell once again, we arose and freshened up and readied ourselves for another night of partying. Ye and Thomas wanted to hit the club scene again that night. They were still popping pills once they had woke. They told me that the twins had invited us to all of us and will be waiting at this new club they had heard about and wanted to see us up there as well. I thought it over and decided to decline the invitation to meet up with those fine ass twins. I had thought perhaps I would score some ass and flesh from one of the twin that I had made out with the previous night, but that night I chose to stay behind because I was still somewhat dazed and probably still high from the last night's events and was sort of scared to try it again. So I advised G and Thomas that I would stay behind and man the hotel room while they went out and enjoyed themselves that night. They didn't bother to hassle me about not going with them and getting wasted. They happily allowed me to do as I wished that night. So once they had freshened up and got ready, they left me all to myself and headed back to New York City for more drugs and partying. And I'm sure they would try to get some ass and pussy that night. As I laughed it over to myself in my head, being alone once again gave me time to things over. Think it over more in detail of what I had got myself into. Then, when I decided to come along with Yi and Thomas for our Labor Day outing. So I thought about how much life had been and what I have got myself into these past years since I finished high school back at home in Long Beach, California. From joining the Navy, going through the rigorous lifestyle of basic, having met and losing Shin Shin, and having gone through Hospital A School at San Diego, putting up with the bullshit at Field Medical Service School, and having the opportunity to learn from so many wonderful people at the Hematology Oncology Clinic back in San Diego, and almost dying in the process from the minor angina, and how much I had spent and sacrificed to get accepted to boost and get into that officer program, only to be booted out of it shortly after, and how my life has gotten to now, and to where it has gotten to now, being stuck on medical hold and trying to run away from myself since then. Personally and internally, I was too afraid to face another night like that again, and I didn't want to let the guys know how scared I was then. I didn't want them to think that I was some kind of pussy then. Well, you are, Dara, a great big pussy. But then again, what am I talking about? You're actually me, but a good pussy you were then. You just being careful, and that's all. I can't fault you for that. So I stayed behind at the travel lodge and watched television and spent the rest of the night alone. As time passed and I got hungry, I decided to order in Chinese food from a nearby restaurant. And I was eating chow mein and fried rice with barbecue pork and teriyaki chicken. I watched several movies and a few adult flicks on the tube. After eating the Asian cuisine and somewhat stuff, I had the undeniable urges to pleasure myself. So I rated myself and jerked myself to sleep, with devilish thought of the twins that I had met at Club Twilo the night before, and the other girls that had come in and out of my young life then. like Tilly, Anne, who I met in my young sinful life back in San Diego at the BEQ, Beverly, Kelly, Suzanne, Maribel, Benevolence, Mary, Diem, Jennifer, Maggie, Tiffany, Candy, Cindy, all that junk. But before spanking the monkey in the hotel room, I was cautious of my surrounding and didn't want to be caught on video camera spanking one of my eye monsters. So I would cover up all the mirrors in the room with the blanket we had. I was pretty paranoid then that someone might be watching me or videotaping the room that I was in. You never know what sick freaks and perverts do these days to get a thrill. And after I felt that I was safe and secure, I whacked off to my heart's content. And after a short while, I cleaned up and showered before falling asleep around 0200 that brisk morning under the stinky shroud of New Jersey blanket. You slept well that night, Dara, after popping in your nightly medication before you slumber, all alone, with only thoughts of the girl you had once had, and of those you could have had, safe and sound then, just like a baby. You fell into slumber that early morning while the world around you were hustling and bustling. You had no worries, except the concern you had for your beloved Shinshinagami. You still prayed for him before each night you went to bed. You asked God Almighty to look over and take care of him for your sake. You often wondered if God was listening. Around 0600 that morning, Yi and Thomas returned to the Travelodge Hotel with their loud knocking and bickering. They woke me up to open the door for them. I, still being cautious, looked out the window first to make sure it was my fellow sailors. Once I let them into the room, they began to tell me of their adventures, misdeed, and doing that previous night. They informed me that they had went to more clubs and did more drugs and more pills and had a hell of a time, hooking up with various promiscuous girls and such. He even boasted about getting his balls yanked and sucked at one of the club by someone he didn't even know. I wasn't sure then if he had told me if it was a girl or guy that had gone down on him that night. I was still sure. Tired and exhausted from their night and pouring, the two drug-up sailors crashed and slept until it was time for us to check out that afternoon. Around 11:30 or so, I woke them up and got our stuff ready to load into the car and ready for checkout. I had to be quite persistent with them that morning, getting them to get ready and such. Once we were all ready and with our belongings loaded, they went to check out. After checking out, Thomas had me drive his Acura for several hours until he was well enough to do the rest of the driving himself. So we gassed up at the vehicle and made up our way back to our command in Newport that afternoon, with hopes and prayers of not being caught and found out of what we had done this past weekend. The trip back to the base went smoothly. We made several stops to get gas, snacks, and such, and the road was smooth sailing all the way back to Newport, Rhode Island. We got back to Newport around 2100 that Sunday night, and no one seemed to be looking for us or wondering where we were, where the hell we were the whole time. The sentry at the command entrance didn't question who we were. They just looked at our military identification card and waved us on through and back into the naval base. Thomas then drove on and dropped me off at my lonely, secluded dorm first, where I had then prepared and ready myself to go back to work the next day by ironing my dungarees, skivvy, smiling and reminiscing about the previous event that I enjoyed in New York as I went about my business at hand. And for the first time in a long time, I was able to get a real good night's sleep due to all the partying that I recently experienced while running away from my routine, mundane life for the brief few days in New Jersey, New York, and New York. And I was once again back to being watched and spied on by the Newport Naval Command. The next day, while mustering up for roll call and being inspected by our command and such, I was informed by Yi that he and Thomas had purchased several bags of exotic and ecstasy pill and such and had brought them back with us to on base. I got a little nervous about the whole matter and internally hoped that we wouldn't get caught. The horrible thing they would do to us if we were caught with the sort of things on base. I can only imagine. Besides using the drug for their personal gain, the two wanted to make some money off the pills as well. I'm sure they were looking for a buyer or whatnot. We didn't tell anyone about what we did in New York or about what we did the past Labor Day weekend. We just simply pretend like nothing had happened and continue on like usual. We got back to what we usually did. The same routine, building cabinets, cleaning the schoolhouse, taking care of the yard work or mess hall that people left behind in their sleeping quarters and such. We were picking up after everyone's once again. Although I didn't like what I was doing on a daily basis there while under medical care and restriction, I was a corpsman. I was a combat corpsman, a medic, and they couldn't put me at the hospital to work. Instead, they had me put me on the cleaning crew. So I carried on with very little complaint. I was happy being able to see my psychologist once a week, where he helped ease and alleviate some of my pain, anger, anguish. I didn't tell Dr. Fitzhugh about my trip to New York and Club Twilo and all the drugs we did and what I had got myself into then. I was very careful to show any signs of change or differences in my behavior and demeanor with him when we saw each other. We usually talk about my state of mind at the moment and things that I had thought about and my plans for the future. I went along with his question and told him what I wanted him to hear. At various times, I begged and pleaded to be sent back to San Diego, where I came from. I wanted to go back to my old command, to be sent back with the same clinic I was once king of. I was desperate to get back to the hematology oncology clinic then, back to the Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Well, Dr. Fitzhugh, he always stated that he'll do what he could, but no promises. And all I could do was accept his comment and suggestion and hope for my prayer to be answered by power beyond any of us. Once again in my life, I prayed to God Almighty for something I so long to get back to. Thank you for listening. This is the end of chapter 68. Be on the lookout for chapter 69, titled Hangouts. This is Do, Ra, me, and I'll see you later. Thank you.